This is a very special weekend coming up in Findlay, indeed, because it is Recognition Day for the Armed Forces, a show that started, I'm not sure how many years ago, but it has become bigger and bigger every year. We have two very special guests we'd like you to meet right now. First of all, Major Jerome Lynes from the U.S. Marine Corps. Major, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for stopping.
Very glad to be here.
You just, as a matter of fact, gave a speech, did you not?
That's correct. I addressed the Findlay Hancock Eggs and Issues group from the Chamber of Commerce, and I had a great time.
Now, Major, you are located where?
I'm located in Perrysburg.
In Perrysburg.
Where I am the active duty advisor to the United States Marine Corps Reserve, which draws from the Findlay area.
Are you about to be transferred?
Unfortunately, I'm leaving this beautiful part of the world, and I'm going to Washington, D.C. to take a new assignment at the headquarters of the Marine Corps.
Can you tell us about that?
It's a personnel assignment. In essence, I will be the major in charge of what all the other majors do. I'll be the guy who calls them up and tells them what their new job is. And I worked that out for about 1,200 officers.
Well, congratulations. Obviously, that's a promotion well earned.
Thank you very much.
I want to welcome in John Devitt. John, good morning. Thanks for joining us. John, you are, and I'm not sure I have your title correct, but I have the Movable Wall Coordinator. Is that close enough?
Sure, that's close. What I did was myself and two other veterans from California, we designed and built the moving wall as a means to share the memorial with people who couldn't get to Washington.
You arrived at Findlay Monday night?
Correct.
And the wall is now up and ready to be seen at the Hancock County Fairgrounds.
Right.
All right. How long have you been doing this, John?
This is the 9th year of taking the wall around the country, which is pretty amazing, I think. It shows that there was a real need, and I think it also shows how deep the hurt ran from our involvement in Vietnam, and the fact that we went for so long without recognizing the tremendous sacrifices that were made.
John, when were you in Vietnam?
I went in September of '67 and left in May of '69.
So you were there 2 years?
Yeah.
How long did it, or has Vietnam ever come out of your system?
Well, no. I thought I was going to come out and be a weight lifted off my back and be out of my life when the first time we set the moving wall up, because it had taken so long to build, and I thought it was really going to be this catharsis that, you know, it would be, Vietnam would be expunged from my life and that would be it. But I really didn't feel that, and now I believe it. Anybody that was involved in it, it will never be that way because of the sacrifices that were made and the bonds that were made at the time. You know, and this is a lifelong commitment. I don't think at the time when I enlisted in the Army and raised my hand and said I do, I realized at that time that it wasn't a 3-year commitment, it was a lifetime commitment.
Major, were you in Vietnam?
I was not, but I'm glad you asked that question. I spent 8 months in Saudi Arabia, and nothing we did in Saudi Arabia, even, you know, the days during the actual liberation of Kuwait, compared to what guys like John did in Vietnam, just for day in, day out fighting. But I would like to say, having studied it some, that one of the reasons we won in Saudi Arabia so quickly, or in Kuwait so quickly, is because we had paid attention to the lessons taught to us by guys like John and the people in Vietnam. The generals who commanded in Desert Storm, the colonels who commanded, were lieutenants and captains or enlisted men in Vietnam, and they paid attention. And we didn't repeat the same mistakes. So today's services honor the people who went before us, particularly the Vietnam vets, by, you know, respecting the lessons they taught us. Desert Storm was a swift and decisive victory that started in Vietnam. And I don't think a lot of people put that connection together. Certainly vets do. And I think people should know that. So I think it's terrific that the moving wall is here. I have visited the original in Washington, been very moved by it. As a young man who was a kid running around a sandlot while he was fighting for his country, you know, I take my hat off to him and to his fellow vets.
Very well put. John, one of the, I don't know if I've said this on the air or not, but maybe one of the stupidest things I ever thought in my life was when I saw the design of the wall. Before it became the wall itself, there was a prototype, obviously, the young Oriental lady who designed it. I saw it, I thought, that is a terrible design. it turns out it is not a terrible design. It's one of the most moving things that ever was. Tell us about your feelings about the wall.
Well, I had the same feelings prior to attending the dedication of the wall. From what I had read about it and the pictures I had seen, I was fairly negative about the memorial itself. And when I went to Washington, D.C. at the time of the dedication, I was going more for the reunion aspect of it. I had this need to find vets that remembered what I remembered about Vietnam. You know, I had heard a lot of people saying things, but it wasn't my experience, and it's not what I felt. So I was looking for other people to solidify what I felt, and I was negative about the wall because it was black. You know, memorials weren't supposed to be black. That was a sign of mourning. It was buried in the ground like they were trying to cover it up or something. It just didn't, you know, everything I read about it was contrary to what a memorial should be. But once I walked up to it, it took me completely by surprise, and it was something that it showed the tremendous sacrifice that Americans made in behalf of their country, and it's just a symbol of the sacrifices that have been made since the Revolutionary War. And to think of it in those terms, it makes everybody humble, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You two gentlemen can provide a contrast for us in the perception of the military. John, you returned to what had to be one of the worst homecomings. I don't know if you did it personally, but Vietnam veterans overall returned to one of the worst homecomings possible for many, many American citizens. The perception of the military at that time, obviously not good, right?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, I don't want to put the blame all on the American public. It was our, you know, what happened at that time was partly our faults too. Now I believe that the majority of Americans were supportive of the veterans returning, but it was like we weren't talking about it, and I think people were uncomfortable bringing the subject up. You know, it's like if you have a relative die, your friends come over and they really don't know what to say. They're not comfortable. They don't know if they should bring it up and have you relive it. So I think that was a lot of the feeling too that went on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Major, since the war in which you participated, the perception, and John makes a good point, probably there were many people who were very proud of veterans but didn't want to talk about it because of maybe a national guilt complex. Certainly that's changed.
There's no doubt that the Desert Storm veterans got the Vietnam Veterans Homecoming, and that the latent feelings of, boy, we should have done something more for these people, was showered upon the Desert Storm veterans, and I think we all recognize that. I don't think the Vietnam veterans begrudge us that, because if you're in the armed forces, if you've been a Marine, you have a legacy with every other guy who's ever been a Marine. The same thing in the Army. So in many regards, the young 19 and 20-year-olds who marched in the parades were walking literally in the footsteps of John's generation, one ahead of us. Mm-hmm. The Desert Storm War, I mean, we went in units, we didn't go individually. The reserves were called up, and when the reserves are called up, that activates mom and dad in every town in America. And that was a lesson from Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Not to piecemeal individuals in, but to send units. And when a unit returns, that's an event. So it all goes back to my earlier point. The lessons of Vietnam were heeded during Desert Storm, and that, in my view, is the ultimate respect we can pay them.
Mm-hmm. John, let's talk about your travels. You travel, obviously, coast to coast, don't you?
Almost worldwide now. In July, we're taking the wall to Guam and to Saipan.
Is there any difference in the perception, in the reception, not only the perception, but the reception of people on the East Coast of the United States, the West Coast, or even as you go across the water?
You can't tell one section of the country from another because everybody is pretty much the same. They have the same desires, of the same reasons for living here. Prior to doing this project, I was under the impression that possibly 10%, maybe 10% of the people in this country had a real inkling of what the country was about, you know, the morality and ethics that it was founded on. But after having taken the wall around and being able to witness firsthand Americans, and not just what I'm reading in the press, but really seeing people in each community, I think it's the exact opposite. I think 90% of the ones that really have a handle on it, and it's 10% that are pretty mindless. Unfortunately, it's the 10% that are make the front pages. And
So the reception is about the same in Arkansas as it would be in Oregon.
and it's tremendous. It's a lot of people are grateful for the opportunity to be able to come out and publicly recognize and give honor to the service and sacrifice that so many made.
John, when you were in Vietnam, obviously the networks were covering Vietnam, and as the war lengthened, the coverage got a little more harsh. You, on the other hand, Major, were in a war that was almost in our living rooms. How difficult does that make a war to fight when the media is given almost free access?
I think the media was given free access in Vietnam. They were not given free access during Desert Storm. Again, the lesson from the Vietnam War. They watch CNN in Baghdad. I mean, electronic transmission of information is instantaneous around the world. We have a unabridged freedom of the press here, but if freedom of the press costs one American soldier his life, one American Marine his life, it's, you know, there's got to be some balance there. Today, in dealing with the media, we run into really two types. Virtually no media people have active military experience themselves, so they either love us or they hate us with no real middle ground. You know, an educated public is one of the strongest things about this country, but you need an educated media in order to present it. So the military is really trying now to work with the media and, you know, to educate not only the media themselves, but the public about what capabilities the services provide the country, what it actually means to be in the Army or in the Marine Corps, the Navy, etc. I think that's been fairly successful. But again, something we learned from Vietnam.
We're going to take a very short break, but please stay with us. We want to talk more with both of you gentlemen. Please stay with us. We'll be back right after this.